All right, I have seen what is the first half of season 2 of Squid Game. So the next half will be later in the year. I don't even know when. But Squid Game is one of the best shows I've seen in a long time. It was just really remarkable and quite a force unto itself. And in a sea of disappointing crap everywhere, and then you find something like this, it's always a cool discovery that it was, found its way on Netflix. And I was very impressed with it and the whole ordeal, start to finish. And then there was the announcement that there would be a follow up. Of course, I mean, when you have a success like that, you got to expect these sort of things. From the get go, I never expected a second one would be anywhere near as good as the original. In a lot of ways, it's kind of one and done. You could leave that alone. And that's that. Of course, you've got the main character who's vowing revenge on the people behind the games. And so he's like, hell, what could you do in the next one? Well, that's it. That's the motivation, is his pursuing revenge on these people. And this is what gets the ball rolling again for another series of the games. That being said, just being a good follow-up would be more than enough. It's just, you're not going to top the first one. That's not possible here. I just don't think. And part of the problems is when they do get back into the games in the show, it's like, yeah, well, it's the same place, and they change things around, of course, but nevertheless, but there's the overarching story of the revenge plot, or I suppose you would see it as justice and that sort of thing. And there's quite a few people with axes to grind. There's new characters brought in who've got their own narratives playing out here. And so there you are, and it gives you enough there to not be lost in it or disappointed. So I'm recommending it. I was very much intrigued with it, and I think this is it. I don't think they can do a third one, so they split this in two. But nevertheless, that's it. I don't know what else you could do. What do you do? It's like, well, now a whole new bunch of people end up in the games. And it's like, well, it's the same thing. It just gets more derivative, and watered down. So you got a cast of characters that are interesting. You got quite a few comical characters, despite all the horror. And this really, overall, what genre is this? It's a bit of a horror series in a lot of ways. I mean, they're the victims of their own greed, but in some cases, quite a few have stories where you can perfectly understand why they would be driven to this. But also they didn't realize what they were getting into, and that kind of thing. But even when they do, and it pauses the philosophical questions and whatnot of, how far would humanity go when they're dangling all that money in front of them. And so that plays out yet again, but that's the ultimate question. And this is being pressed in this a battle of wills between, the winner of last game and the villains in charge of this. And primarily one, the front man, as he's called. And that plays out very well. And of course, it's only the first half. And so you see that's the reason for this, and that's the only thread of credibility to some of this. Now, in the first episode and how it ended, I was thinking, I don't really buy the ending of how that goes. When you see it, you'll understand what I mean. I don't think that guy would have done that unless he's just as enmeshed in this sort of philosophical view, however dark it is, on humanity. And he put himself in this position on the game and whatnot. that's the way this works. And then you're kind of getting a foreshadowing of what's going to transpire throughout the series between the main, protagonist and antagonist here. And so it's meanwhile, there's the other story of the other part of achieving revenge on here, another character who returns and stuff like that. And that's playing out. It starts off rather strong and kind of fades towards, it's more about the games again. But how it ends, and you think, oh man, maybe this is where it goes. But then once I knew it was only the first half, it's not ending here. There's quite a spectacular end midway through onto it, but it's also a lot of this. Sometimes I was beginning to wonder if this was just the fantasies, because sometimes there's a couple of scenes where the guy's just dreaming and that sort of thing. And then how could you ever tell in this bizarre, surreal landscape of Squid Game? But nevertheless, no, it wasn't. But it's still, it's almost like Brazil or something like that, about the crushing of one's spirit and that sort of thing. That's also an element in this. When you think you finally got the advantage, and then it all comes crushing down around you and all that. So there's a lot of backstabbing interplay there, and quite a few, colorful cast of characters. Now, there is a trans character in this one. It's this guy who wants to be a woman, and hasn't fully transitioned. And so that's the motivation for this person to get the money. I wouldn't think you would need that much money for the surgery, but I suppose, a lifelong, he was kind of young. So, oh boy, it's going to be a lot of hormone injections you're going to need over the years. So that could be pretty expensive. Still, I wouldn't think you would need, I forget how many billions they get. But anyway, that's the character's motivation. Well, all right. But this character becomes kind of, there's this misfit team of people that the other teams just didn't care to have because they didn't think they could win and this sort of stuff. And, but of course, the trans character is just the greatest person ever, quite saintly, And yet there's a moment where the trans character makes a decision that has dire consequences for the other players and whatnot. And so I was like, oh, well, you're making them make a bad choice here. The obvious choice was to get the hell out of there as soon as possible and that sort of thing. So when this plays out, I thought, that's one, but then that's it. The rest of it is still great guy or girl, as it were. And everybody's like, well, it's okay. I know you really need the money for your surgery and stuff. Like, other people are there because their family has some incurable disease, or they're, and most of them are, they're consumed with debt, and a lot of them are just greedy. But still, and a couple of them lost all their money to the mob, and now they owe it back, and their mob's gonna take it, and one guy says they're gonna sell his organs and stuff like that. But no, you need, some cosmetic surgery. It's not comparable to the two to do this, even though at the point you still probably could have done all right had you left. So yeah, that's a bit, you got to protect the character, in and of itself. That's one of the flaws with that narrative. Just having a trans character in the show doesn't really bother me, but of course, what's happened with professional activists has irradiated the landscape. So every time you do this, it's going to turn a lot of people off. And no matter how unfair it might be, well, I blame it on the professional political activists who exploited this and that for their own grift. And this is the result of that. However, some of these aspects here, I think, I don't know that people would have been so happy or forgiving with the decision that he made there. But ultimately, other chances for heroic acts down the road, I suppose. But nevertheless, That's all I'll say on that, beyond, spoiling everything. But so, of course, not as good as the first season, even though it's only the first half of the second. Um, but probably good enough. So I do recommend it. It's a strong series. And of course, if you haven't seen the first one, you have to watch the first one. This isn't something you can just jump in, without it. Otherwise, you're completely lost, really. And the first one is, of course, a masterpiece. So there we have it. Squid Game Season 2, Part 1. It's 7 episodes. Do check it out. And then stay tuned for Part 2 sometime later this year.